Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Claudia Simone Dorchain. I'm a PhD in philosophy, and I would like to talk to you today about a topic which has been recently largely discussed in research. It is the mysticism of Meister Eckhart, and especially the concept of evil within mysticism or in the mystical thought. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I have to apologize for my English because I'm no English native speaker. My mother tongue is German, but I would like to translate my research to you. The nature of evil. Isn't it something which is rather uncommon in what we call mystical thought or the mystical universe? Isn't mysticism, as we put it, something very poetical and something very much oriented towards what we call the positivity and not the negativity of being? Not necessarily. Mysticism is a kind of perspective. It is perspective thought. There is mysticism of everything, if you would like to name it. Mysticism of Christianity, mysticism of Judaism, mysticism of Islam, mysticism of Hinduism. But all those concepts of mysticism as a perspective, as a way of perceiving certain religious or spiritual phenomena, has got much to do with an underlying ethical concept. All religions deal with ethical ideas and justify their version of ethics. And mysticism as a perspective, for example, of Christianity or of the Christian faith, more general, has got much to do with what Christians call the definition of good or evil, or the morally good or the morally evil. There is one idea which has a long tradition in Western philosophy. It is the idea of good and evil being monolithic blocks of identities, the idea of substantial evil and substantial good. The idea of two principles, one good, one evil, in eternal opposition to each other, is also the concept underlying the so-called manichaeism, or the idea of the Persian philosopher Mani, who has had the imagination of two principles, good and evil, fighting against each other. And this idea has been very influential in Western philosophy and theology. For example, Augustinus was, in his early stages of development, very much influenced by the idea of manichaeism and those two substantial principles, good and evil, fighting against each other. And many other prominent thinkers of the Western traditions have been influenced by this concept. But if we do research on Meister Eckhart and we are looking for these manichaeist ideas, we often do not find what we are looking for. As Bernhard McGinns states, the so-called dynamic force or demonic power of evil, it means evil as a substantial entity, cannot be easily found in Meister Eckhart's mysticism. In my opinion, it cannot found in it at all, because Eckhart's mysticism does not contain such an idea. For Eckhart, evil is not substantial, but it is a possibility which may be realized by humankind because of its divine origin. This is rather complicated as an idea, but I would like to explain it to you. For Meister Eckhart, all human beings derive from the same source, from the divine source. And this divine source bestows the power on them to decide in their own free decision whether they would choose the so-called good or the so-called evil. So the question of moral or the question of ethics is for Eckhart not so much a question of ontology, means of entities, of beings, of principles, but it is a question of intellectuality and psychology, how people act, not what there is as an entity, but more how they act, what they are inclined to do, what their motivation may be. And so for Eckhart it is clear to see that what we call evil, what we call not good in a moral or ethical point of view, is a consequence of the primordial human freedom to choose for oneself. So the concept of being born from a divine source, from the so-called Grund or ground, as Eckhart puts it, gives as a consequence an ultimate freedom to each human individual, even the freedom to decide in moral regard for the worse and not for the better. So even the criminal and even a person who does very evil moral acts is for Meister Eckhart a person who performs his or her freedom given by the source of being, because the source of being does not manipulate human individuals with obligations. They are not forced to do good because they come from the divine being, but they can freely choose whether to be good in a moral sense or evil in a moral sense. So for Eckhart, evil is the natural consequence of the ultimate freedom of humankind as such. And this is a rather visionary approach, because as we remember, ladies and gentlemen, Eckhart lived in the 14th century. It was a completely different world compared to today. He had not and he could not have an imagination of what nuclear war is, or which weapons we use today, which technology we have, and that humankind today is actually in a position and has actually the power to destroy itself. In the 14th century this was unimaginable, but for Eckhart it is clear that the possibility of deciding for evil, for destruction, lies within the human freedom and dignity which is granted by coming from the divine source. And he says, es ist erschreckend, wie sehr sich der Mensch von Gott entfernen kann. It's German. This means it is frightening how far a human individual can deprive oneself from the divine source. Yeah? But this deprivation or self-deprivation is also a consequence of human freedom. And this freedom for Eckhart is an enormous trust of the divine source in human intellectuality, So, if we question the role of evil in Meister Eckhart's mysticism, or in the mystical thought of Meister Eckhart, we see it is combined with ontology, because his ethics are a consequence of his ideas on ontology. Humankind does what it does because it is what it is. Humankind may act in perfect freedom, and perfect does not mean harmony. It means without boundaries, unlimited. Yeah, humankind may act in unlimited freedom because it is created and self-created, partly, from the divine source, by the divine source. So for Eckhart, the question of ethics is a question of being, but not of the supposed being of moral principles as good and evil, as entities on their own, but on the ontology of God. God as the eternal possibility and the unlimited possibility, as he puts it in the tradition of negative theology. God as unlimited possibility bestows on mankind unlimited possibilities too, as an expression or self-expression. And this unlimited possibility contains also the possibility of destruction and self-destruction. So destructive acts, or what we call evil, can be, in Eckhart's mysticism, a product of the ultimate freedom of the human soul.